You know that feeling when you check your bank account and instead of immediately closing the app while making istighfar, you actually smile. Like when you stop calculating whether you have to pull from your Zakat reserve to cover the electric bill or whether saying yes to that wedding gift means eating dal and rice for the rest of the month. There's a specific number where this shift happens for Muslims, and it's not what most people think. Most finance gurus on YouTube will tell you that you need $1 million to feel wealthy, or that 6 figures is the magic number. The Muslim YouTube finance crowd will tell you it's all about getting a halal mortgage or starting a business. But here's the thing they're missing. There's a much smaller milestone that completely transforms your relationship with money inside the halal frame, and once you hit it, everything changes. That number is $20,000. My name is Omar, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, halal finance, and why so many practicing Muslims feel like the entire conventional financial system is built to slowly drag them out of the deen one default fund at a time. If you're someone who actually wants to understand how to build wealth without compromising on riba, zakat, or your peace of mind, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it ends up helping you see your money differently. Now, before we dive into why $20,000 is the real game changer for a Muslim household, let me ask you something. When you think about building halal wealth, what comes to mind? Maybe you picture some uncle who got into real estate in 1998 and now owns half the strip malls in your city. Or perhaps you imagine a brother who's been grinding for 15 years, slowly accumulating wealth one wahed deposit at a time. The truth is, halal wealth building doesn't work the way most people think it does. Here's what actually happens. There are certain financial thresholds that act like invisible barriers, and once you cross them, the rules of the game completely change. $20,000 is the first major threshold that separates the Muslims who will quietly build serious wealth from those who will spend their entire lives trapped between conventional products they can't morally use and halal products they can't yet afford. And the crazy part is, most people have no idea this threshold even exists. Think about it this way. If you've ever tried to push a heavy boulder up a hill, you know that getting it started is the hardest part. You're straining, sweating, making very little progress, and questioning whether it's even possible. But once you build enough momentum, something happens. The boulder starts moving faster, and eventually, when you reach the top, it rolls down the other side almost effortlessly. $20,000 is that turning point where your halal financial boulder finally crests the hill. Everything before this point feels like you're pushing uphill against gravity. Everything after this point feels like gravity and baraka are working in your favor. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is something that will probably surprise you. The difference isn't just mathematical. It's not simply that you have more money to invest in Zoya Screen stocks or that your returns are larger in absolute terms. The real magic happens in your brain. When you don't have money saved, your brain operates in what psychologists call survival mode. Every financial decision is filtered through fear and scarcity. You take the first job offer that comes along, even if the culture forces you to compromise on prayer breaks because you can't afford to be picky. You stay in a haram-adjacent role you hate because leaving feels too risky. You say yes to a credit card cashback bonus that you know in your heart is built on riba because you need that $200 right now. This isn't just about being practical or responsible. When you're in survival mode, your brain literally can't think about growth and opportunity. It's like trying to plan Hajj while your house is on fire. Your mental bandwidth is completely consumed by immediate threats and short-term survival. But something remarkable happens when you cross the $20,000 threshold. Suddenly your brain has the space to think differently. Instead of asking, how do I survive until next paycheck, you start asking, how do I grow this in a way that's actually halal? Instead of being reactive to every financial crisis that pops up, you become proactive about building wealth the right way. Research from Vanguard shows that having just $2,000 in emergency savings increases your financial well-being by 21%. $2,000. That's less than most Muslim families spend on a single Eid al-Adha. But that small buffer creates a massive psychological shift because it moves you out of pure survival mode. When you push that emergency fund to 3 to 6 months of living expenses, which for most people land somewhere around $20,000, you cross another threshold that's specific to us. You blow past nisab. The 2026 silver-based nisab in the US is sitting around $1,495 according to current spot prices tracked by SAPA-USA and the American Muslim Community Foundation. And most US scholars, including Joe Bradford, recommend the silver standard because it captures more wealth and feeds more poor people, which means once you've held even a fraction of that $20,000 above your debts for one full lunar year, you owe 2.5% in zakat. That's a real obligation obligation, not a vibe, and it changes how you have to think about every dollar above the line. Here's where the math starts getting really exciting. Let's say you're saving $1,000 a month into a halal vehicle. Maybe it's Wahed Invest, where the US minimum is just $100 and the wrap fee is 0.99% under $250,000. Maybe it's a self-directed brokerage holding a Zoya screened equity portfolio. Either way, getting to your first $20,000 takes about 19 months at an 8% return assumption. That's a year and a half of discipline, especially when half your social circle is stacking cashback cards and high-yield savings accounts, both of which carry riba in different forms. Most people give up somewhere along the way, but here's the part that will blow your mind. Your second $20,000 doesn't take another 19 months, it only takes about 17, because now that first $20,000 is working alongside your monthly contributions, generating returns through actual equity in actual companies, not interest. Same effort, same screened risk, 2 months shaved off just because you had more money working for you in the halal way. By the time you're going for your third $20,000, the timeline shrinks more, and once you hit $400,000 in a halal portfolio, you can generate your next $20,000 in about 5 months, mostly through dividends and price appreciation on screened equities. The same amount that took 2 years initially is now happening automatically. That first milestone feels impossible, but everyone after gets easier. Now you might be thinking that wealthy Muslims have access to some secret halal investment world that regular folks can't touch. Like there are exclusive sukuk offerings or private real estate syndications that only unlock once you reach certain wealth levels. And while there is some truth to that at the ultra high end, it's not what's driving this $20,000 phenomenon. The real secret is much simpler and much more encouraging. It's just basic mathematics working inside the halal frame. When you invest $1,000 of screened equities and it grows 10% in a year, you make $100. Take that same 10% return and apply it to $10,000, and suddenly you're looking at $1,000 in profit from the same investment, same time frame, same level of screened risk. This is why hitting $20,000 feels like such a turning point. Up until that point, your investment returns feel almost insignificant because you're working with smaller amounts. A 10% return on $2,000 is $200. Nice, but not exactly umrah money. But a 10% return on $20,000 is $2,000. Now we're talking about money that actually matters. And the beautiful part is the screened version of the global market has historically tracked the conventional version closely. Once you exclude the financials and the haram industries, you're not giving up returns, you're just refusing to own the riba. The investment vehicles aren't any more sophisticated than what someone with $1,000 can use. You can buy the exact same Sharia screened ETF, use the exact same Wahed account, follow the same basic principles. The only difference is scale, and that scale transforms small percentage wins into real progress. But here's the part that most people completely miss, and it might be the most important point in this entire video. When you save your first halal $20,000, you've actually accomplished something far more valuable than just accumulating a number above nisab. You fundamentally rewired your nafs and built the most important financial habit you'll ever develop. And this might sound like khutbah talk, but stick with me because this is where things get really practical. Think about what it actually takes to save $20,000 as a Muslim if you're starting from zero. Unless you're earning a software engineer salary or living with your parents in a multi-generational setup, this requires serious discipline. You had to track where every dollar was going. You had to say no to things you wanted, including some things your friends were doing, so you could set money aside instead. You had to resist using the credit card rewards program everyone keeps recommending. You had to track your Zakat anniversary on the lunar calendar so you actually know when nisab clocks in. You proved to yourself that you can control your money instead of letting it control you. You became the kind of Muslim who can delay gratification when it really matters. That's not just a financial skill, that's a tarbaya level life skill. And here's the kicker. According to the Islamic Social Services Association of America and ISPU's American Muslim poll, about 37% of US Muslim households earn under $30,000 a year, compared to 26% of the general public. So if you crossed $20,000 in halal savings, you didn't just hit a number, you outperformed the demographic odds inside a community where the financial pressure is real. That identity shift is huge because it affects every financial decision you make going forward. Before you had $20,000 saved, buying a $4 specialty coffee might have required mental gymnastics about whether you should have just put it towards sadaqah or your Hajj fund. After you hit $20,000, you're not sweating the small stuff anymore because you know your priorities are straight. You've proven you can make the big sacrifices when necessary. But there's another psychological shift that happens at this level that most people don't talk about. You start seeing seeing opportunities instead of just threats. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, every unexpected expense feels like a fitna test. Your car needs repairs, your laptop dies before your kid's online madrasa class, your rent goes up faster than your raise. These aren't opportunities, they're emergencies that derail your entire month. But when you have $20,000 in halal savings, those same events become minor inconveniences. Your car needs repairs, annoying but not catastrophic. Your laptop dies, time to upgrade, your rent goes up. Maybe it's time to actually run the math on a guidance residential or UIF home purchase plan and see if the markup-based structure makes sense for your family. Even better, you start noticing opportunities that were always there but you couldn't take advantage of before. Your cousin mentions he's starting a small halal meal prep business and looking for an equity partner. Before, you would have made dua for him and moved on. Now you can actually consider whether $5,000 of musharaka-style equity makes sense. A killer deal pops up on a small rental property in your neighborhood. Before, you would have scrolled past it and felt envious. Now you can run the numbers using one of the diminishing musharaka products and see if the structure is workable. Your masjid mentions a CEO of a halal fintech is doing a quiet investor day for accredited Muslims. Before, you would have made excuses. Now you can show up, ask questions, and at least be in the room. This is what the people quietly building wealth in our community mean when they talk about being in a position to act. It's not some secret network. It's that having money gives you options, and options create more opportunities to make money in halal ways. Here's something else that happens around the $20,000 mark that will make you question everything you thought you knew about budgeting. You start caring less about small expenses and more about big ones. I know that sounds backwards. When you're broke, you obsess over every purchase. The name brand aid or the generic, the slightly cheaper halal butcher 10 minutes further, the weekday Islamic school or the cheaper Sunday one. These decisions consume mental energy because every dollar feels precious. But once you have a foundation, those micro decisions are largely irrelevant. What matters are the big ones: where you live, what you drive, what home financing structure you commit to, where you invest, how you handle zakat and inheritance planning. These choices swing your net worth and your iman by tens of thousands of dollars over time. So instead of agonizing over dates, you focus on optimizing housing costs, maximizing income, and making sure your portfolio is actually screened and not just labeled halal by some app's marketing team. Now let's talk about what happens to your career once you hit this milestone, because this is where things get really interesting for Muslims specifically. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're trapped in whatever job you have. Your boss could schedule mandatory meetings during Jummah. Client dinners might be at places where the only halal option is fries. Your default 401k fund might be loaded with conventional bank stocks and interest-bearing bonds. But you can't push back and you can't leave because you need that next paycheck. You can't ask HR for a self-directed brokerage account option because you're afraid they'll see you as the difficult person. You can't move that Friday meeting, you're stuck, but $20,000 changes the dynamic. Suddenly you have what I call walking away money. You could quit tomorrow and survive for months while you find something better. You're negotiating from strength instead of desperation. Suddenly, asking your employer to add an SDBA option to the 401k, exactly the kind of advocacy Joe Bradford and the Zoya team have been pushing for years, doesn't feel terrifying. It feels like a reasonable religious accommodation request you can make from a position of professional value. You ask for the raise, you move the Friday meeting, you explore firms with actual prayer rooms. You don't even have to spend the walking away money. Just having it changes your demeanor at work. People notice. Better assignments, more recognition, more money. The baraka of not compromising under pressure compounds alongside the dollars. But here's where most people mess this up, and I see it constantly in our community. They hit $20,000, feel that psychological shift, and immediately blow it. A brand new car because they deserve it. An expensive Umrah package because they've earned it. A down payment on a conventional mortgage because they convince themselves the halal options are too expensive without actually doing the math against guidance, UIF or La Riba. Don't do this. That $20,000 is not a reward for good behavior. It's the foundation of your entire financial future and probably your kids' future too. It's the seed that grows into generational Fare distributable wealth if you're patient enough to let it compound. And here's a stat that will make you laugh or cry. The average American spends more on their car over their lifetime than it would take to fully fund Hajj for the family, max out an IRA every year for 20 years, and still leave a meaningful Farid inheritance. Between car payments, insurance, maintenance, and gas, most people drop $600 to $800 a month on transportation. Over 40 years, that's easily $400,000 just to get from point A to point B. Meanwhile, they're saying they can't afford a halal home purchase plan or regular sadaqah. The moment you drive a new car off the lot, it loses about 20% of its value. So you're not just spending money, you're destroying destroying wealth that could have been invested in screened equities or put toward your kids' Islamic education. But cars are emotional. You want something reliable, something that makes the anti-network finally admit you made it. Nothing wrong with that as long as you understand the trade. That car payment might make you feel wealthy, but it's actually keeping you poor and pushing your Zakat payable wealth lower than it should be. This is where $20,000 changes your perspective on major purchases. Instead of can I afford the monthly payment, you start asking what is this really costing me an opportunity? In Zakat, in Baraka, that $30,000 car isn't $30,000. It's $30,000 that could have grown to over $200,000 in a screen portfolio over 20 years. Zakat purified along the way. Driving a reliable used car stops feeling like a sacrifice. It feels like a strategic choice, funding your future, your families, and the next families after that. The brother in the flashy new car is probably stressed. The brother in the older Honda is quietly building wealth, paying Zakat on time, and sleeping better. This mindset shift extends to every major financial decision you make. Housing, education, weddings, Hajj funds, hobbies, everything gets filtered through the lens of opportunity cost and the lens of barakah, not in an obsessive way that sucks the joy out of life, but in a strategic way that ensures you're making intentional choices instead of letting your wealth slip through your fingers on things that don't actually matter to you or your family. And let me tell you something that might surprise you. Once you start thinking this way, you often realize you don't actually want half the stuff you thought you wanted. The bigger house in the suburbs, the extra space would be nice, but is it worth delaying your financial independence and your kids' Islamic education by 5 years? That expensive hobby, it's fun, but there are probably cheaper sonor-aligned ways to get the same satisfaction. This isn't about becoming a miser who never spends anything, because the Prophet ﷺ himself was generous with his wealth. It's about becoming intentional with your money instead of letting it slip away on things that don't actually serve you or the ummah. Look, $20,000 isn't going to make you rich overnight, and it isn't a halal mortgage in cash, and it isn't generational wealth on its own, but it will fundamentally change how you think about money, opportunity, and your obligations as a Muslim navigating a conventional financial system. It's the difference between surviving and thriving. It's the difference between reacting to life and designing it within the boundaries of the deen. Start building that foundation today, because your future self, your future kids, and the people who'll receive your ferried shares one day are counting on the decisions you make right now. As always, the math is the math, the scholarly views are the scholarly views, and your final ruling has to come from a scholar you trust who knows your situation. But the boulder is yours to push. Ask Allah for tawfiq, do the work, and trust the process.